Emily Chang, and this is the best of Bloomberg Technology, where we bring you all our top interviews from this week in tech. Coming up, more fallout from the chip flaw spreading through technology. Our conversation with ARM Holdings CEO Simon Segars. Plus, highlights from our coverage on the ground at the Consumer Electronics Show. In the next hour, you'll hear from Carlos Ghosn, CEO of Renault Nissan, and Sony CEO Kazuo Hirai. And GoPro takes a dive. We speak with CEO Nick Woodman after the company cuts its revenue forecast and slashes jobs. First, to our lead, the continued fallout over the microchip security flaw affecting nearly all of the world's devices. This week, Microsoft said fixes for the Spectre and Meltdown vulnerabilities may significantly slow down servers and personal computers. In a blog post on Tuesday, the company suggested slowdowns could be more substantial than Intel previously indicated. Microsoft is also temporarily suspending some updates to Windows operating systems that use chips from AMD that are freezing or not booting up as a result of the fix. Monday night at CES, Intel CEO Brian Krzanich tried to reassure people that their data would be safe.
Security is job number one for Intel and our industry. So the primary focus of our decisions and discussions have been to keep our customers' data safe. As of now, we have not received any information that these exploits have been used to obtain customer data.
We broke it all down with Bloomberg Tech's Ian King, who covers the chip industry.
To start off with, Intel was very much, look, we are the world, we're all in this together, everything's going to be fine, just nothing to see here, move along. Now we're getting them, as we just heard from Brian Krzanich, admitting maybe things are a little bit worse than we'd kind of said they were. And then Microsoft coming out and saying, no, actually, we are kind of finding some problems in certain circumstances. So really, this industry-wide effort to put a brave face on it and say there was no problem appears to be fragmenting.
So what exactly is Microsoft saying here?
That in certain circumstances, particularly in servers, it appears as though the slowdowns as a result of these remedies that are being put in place are worse than had been previously thought. So,
talk about then what exactly this means, because, if the fix doesn't work, then what?
Yeah. Well, it's a choice, right? You fix it and you're safe, but your computer doesn't work like it should, or you don't fix it and you're vulnerable, right? So you buy more servers to make up for the performance breakdown. Do you struggle by with a corporate system that doesn't work as well? I mean, there are all of these now ugly alternatives that appear to be out there.
We also have an update from ARM.
Yep.
They're saying 5% of their chips are affected. Luckily, it's not 100%.
Right.
So what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, this is really important because remember, ARM's technology is in every smartphone, your iPhone, your Android phone, whatever, right? Many more chips out there based on ARM technologies than actually Intel's technology. They're coming out and saying, look, since 1991, 120 billion chips using our technology are out there. Only about 5% of those are vulnerable to only one of these potential exploits. So they're really saying that this isn't a huge deal.
So we now have some headlines crossing the terminal about senators urging the SEC and the Department of Justice to investigate Brian Krzanich's share sale. We talked about this last week.
Right.
You mentioned that it was a planned share sale, but he is now down to the minimum of his holdings.
Correct.
I mean, do you expect more to happen here?
Right. Well, as we discussed at the time, Intel's stance was, look, this is a regular program. This has been in place for a long time. This is the way that companies do this. However, this problem, as it's blown up, was actually known to Intel before this plan was put in place. People are now looking at this and saying, look, hold on, maybe this kind of a regular plan, the excuse that executives always use to sort of ensure themselves against this kind of an accusation, maybe that doesn't stand up in this case, and that's what these two senators are saying and trying to put pressure on the SEC to go and have a look at this.
We also have a headline crossing out of Store Simple Appliances saying that they don't expose any exploitable credible vulnerability related to Intel, related to either of these Meltdown or the Spectre issue. What does this mean?
Yeah, I mean, again, they're just adding to a list of companies that have said, look, no real problem here. I mean, the most prominent amongst those is probably Google. They've said, look, you know, we've patched everything, everything's okay, there's no slowdown. So we're really getting conflicting information here, and really what we have to find out and what we're working on, you know, and I'm sure a lot of other people are working on, is finding out where really is the truth here, and what really is apparent is a lot of people don't actually know yet. So we're obviously going to see a lot of
So what next? I mean, what are you waiting for?
Well, that's the thing. We really need to see all of these patches deployed. We really need to see what kind of a material impact that's going to have. We're going to see Intel report earnings later this month. We're going to see how that impacts their, you know, maybe people don't buy their chips, maybe people need more of their chips.
And as a consumer, should you download the patch or not?
Well, this has been one of the consistent messages. If you're an average PC user, if you have a fairly modern system, one that you've been bought in the last couple of years, you've really got nothing to worry about. Download a patch, you'll be safer.
That was Bloomberg's Ian King. One company feeling the heat from the chip flaw, ARM Holdings, which is at the heart of the most major mobile phone components. The company says about 5% of chips made using its designs are vulnerable to the potential hardware hack known as Spectre. We spoke with ARM Holdings CEO Simon Segars from the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas and asked how concerned consumers should be about these issues.
It is a very serious issue, but it is one that the industry as a whole is taking very seriously. It's one that we're taking very seriously. You know, we're thinking about our future designs and how to further mitigate against issues such as this. We're working very closely with our partners to make sure that the software mitigations that we've developed and have developed over a series of months are distributed, that people are using them, that people are installing them correctly, and that we can provide the maximum safety to any user of an electronic system.
How long, though, before remedies are fully in place?
Well, I think it's going to depend on which system, you know, which type of device you're talking about. You know, for some, it's relatively straightforward to update devices, but in other cases, there's a vast number of companies involved in the overall supply chain to get products to market, so it may take some time. It's really going to be case by case, and it's going to be up to the individual OEMs of the products who need to take on this software and get it pushed out to their customers. I mean, exactly how long that's going to take is a bit hard to say, but you know, everybody is on this with a huge sense of urgency.
Now, Android updates are pushed much more haphazardly than Apple, which means some older phones might be left stranded. How much of a concern is that? Do you feel Android is more at risk?
Well, one of the things about some of those older devices is that they contain less sophisticated processors, which are much less susceptible to the security issues that we're seeing here. You know, there are a vast number of Android devices using CPUs from ARM, which aren't susceptible at all to this security issue. So it's not a fair characterization to say that every phone that's ever been manufactured is at risk here, because that is not the case.
When it comes to the actual hardware, is there a fundamental way for you to redo your chip architecture to avoid this?
The hardware features can dictate how much risk there is. So going forwards, as we look at this, obviously, you know, for anything that's easy to work around, we're going to do that. For some of the more sophisticated features, it is about the combination of the hardware and software that determines whether there is a risk introduced or not. And so I think what you're going to see going forwards is much tighter guidelines on how to write software to use microprocessors in a safe way. You know, I think what this episode has shown is that, you know, we're in a new world of security. Security risks are changing all the time, and the definition of what safe looks like, you know, really has changed. It has caused a fundamental rethink of this.
I'm curious how much of a wake-up call this has been for you. Has it raised any concern that the chip industry is just too concentrated?
Well, I mean, it's in terms of a wake-up call. I mean, security is something that we take very, very seriously. We always have. We've been looking at the deployments of ARM processors in safety-critical systems, in security-critical systems for many, many years. So, you know, we've always been looking at and thinking about how might a hacker get into a system, trying to stay, you know, 2 steps ahead of how bad actors will try and exploit systems, and try and learn as much as we can from the research that goes on in a very broad way. This, at one level is another case of a security issue that's been uncovered. It is different because it is much more hardware fundamental than others in the past. Many security issues that you see talked about are down to software and the way that software is written. This is much more of the interaction of the two, so it is a little bit different. I think one thing to take away from this whole incident is the way the industry has come together and collaborated in a really positive way. The issues around competition have been put aside as the industries work together to try and mitigate these issues. I think that's a really positive thing because there are going to be new issues in the future and the industry needs to react in the same way, work in a really positive way together.
But do you think the way that the industry has consolidated so much over the last several years could actually be a negative, especially when considering just how widespread this flaw is?
Well, I guess there's two ways of looking at that. You can say, if there's a lot of consolidation, then there are a relatively small number of points of failure. On the other hand, with a relatively small number of parties involved, it's much easier to coordinate a response. One of the reasons that we're seeing time taken to get all this software pushed out is because of the complexity, because of the diversity in the manufacturers involved.
That was ARM Holdings CEO Simon Segars. Well, Apple is facing a French criminal probe on whether the company deliberately slowed battery performance on older iPhones. This follows allegations from consumer groups. A preliminary investigation began against the company last week for, quote, programmed obsolescence and deceit. And here in the U.S., a member of Congress is also speaking out. Republican Senator John Thune wrote a letter to Apple CEO Tim Cook asking for details about how the company is handling customer complaints. In a Bloomberg television interview, Thune was disappointed with Apple's response so far.
We just don't think they've been sufficiently transparent with the American people. There are a lot of customers and consumers out there who have observed and noticed the changes in some of these Apple devices, and the fact that they would have those devices degraded in terms of their capabilities without them knowing why, I think is what we're trying to get at.
And more news for Apple this week. Activist investor Jana Partners and the California State Teachers Retirement System are urging Apple to create ways for parents to restrict children's access to their mobile phones. The shareholders want the company to study the effects of heavy usage on mental health. They fear the mesmerizing qualities of the iPhone could foster a public health crisis. Coming up, Carlos Ghosn, CEO of Renault Nissan, joins us next to talk about the future of automotives, from ride-sharing to electric cars. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg. More news out of the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas this week. Amazon's Alexa service will be available in certain Toyota and Lexus cars sometime this year. The voice-activated virtual assistant will let drivers and passengers get directions, control entertainment features, and perform other functions in the car via voice command. Also, there at CES, the Renault Nissan Mitsubishi Alliance announced a new venture capital fund with plans to invest $1 billion over the next 5 years. Chairman and CEO Carlos Ghosn joined us from the event in Las Vegas to talk about the fund. Take a listen.
We have so many things to do for the next 6 years, which is about the transformation of the car. And I don't think we can do it alone. I think we're going to need a lot of innovation and creativity coming from startups, or also support coming from partners. And we think that the way we are organized today is not sufficient. That's why we came with a new organization, additional organization, which is a corporate venture capital with investments up to $200 million a year. For the next midterm plan, which adds up to more than $1 billion, in order to support our effort transforming the car into electric, autonomous, and connected product.
VC investing just hit the highest levels since the U.S. .com boom. $84 billion deployed into startups last year. How much competition is there out there to develop and deploy the kind of technology that you are trying to develop?
Oh, there is a lot of technology out there. That means I can see it. I'm receiving a lot of people. I'm hearing a lot of ideas. Now, we have to be very careful because there are a lot of very interesting ideas, but how many of them are going to survive, how many of them are going to be able to be really implemented, executed at a reasonable price that consumers are willing to pay. This is where the challenge is. Now, when we're talking about $1 billion over the midterm plan, let's not forget that the Alliance will be investing $50 billion for all the technological development. So 1 billion over 50 billion is about 2 or 3% of our overall effort, which put it in its context.
So will you really be reading people's brains and using that to help them drive their cars?
Yeah, well, this is, I think, an illustration about the fact that this is not only about autonomous driving, which means that the driver drive whenever he wants, he can let the car drive for him whenever he wants, but also that the car is going to help the driver be a better driver. That's what we call enhanced driving. So what we want is, on top of the autonomous drive, add what we call enhanced driving experience, where the car helps the driver be a better driver, avoid risk, be much safer, and optimize the driving experience. That's what we're talking about.
So when do you think we'll have fully autonomous cars on the road, and how will people use them?
Oh, I think it's going to be down the road within the next 4 years. I'm talking about mass marketing here. I'm not talking about having prototypes ready for use, because we already have prototypes working very well. It may take 3 to 4 years before the regulation allows this to be mass marketed, before we make sure that the system is totally robust in any conditions. So I would say 2021, 2022.
Wow, that's soon. So how do you see U.S. tax reform impacting auto demand? Do you think there will be a shift towards the luxury segment?
Oh, I think this obviously support activity and support spending and support consumption, which means that I think this is going to be good for the auto industry in general. And the fact particularly that the support and the incentives for zero-emission cars have been maintained is also very good news for the development of the electric cars. So I'm seeing it very positively as a business person.
What are you hearing out of NAFTA negotiations? Do you think that there can be a deal that won't raise the price of cars significantly?
It's very difficult to predict. I think in this field we have to be prudent, watch carefully what's going on, try as much as possible, give the different policymakers data and facts in order for them to make the best decision for their own country, whatever we're talking about, obviously the United States, but also about Mexico. That's what car makers can do, just make sure that the revision of the policy is in the best interest of the different parties.
Business Week once wrote a story that if Davos were a person, it would be Carlos Ghosn. President Trump has now announced that he'll be attending Davos. What do you make of the president attending this decidedly global event, preaching America first?
No, I think it was going to be extremely interesting. I think Davos is first a place where many people meet to discuss about important subjects that matter for countries and that matter for people. And the more people participate, particularly people with high power level, the more interesting it is and the more it gives meaning to Davos. So I welcome this opportunity.
Renault Nissan Chair and CEO Carlos Ghosn there. And still ahead, Sony has had some big moments at the box office this year thanks to smashes like Spider-Man and Jumanji. But the CEO says the company isn't stopping there. He joins us later this hour. This is Bloomberg. China has entered the top 5 in U.S. patents for the first time ever. Chinese inventors received 11,241 U.S. patents last year, a 28% increase over the same period in 2016. This according to a report by IFI Claims Patent Services. China ranks behind the U.S., Japan, Korea, and Germany overall. And GoPro's challenges are coming to a head. The company missed its fourth quarter sales guidance, signaling that revamped cameras and price increases aren't sparking revenue growth. Shares tumbled off the news, leading to its worst performance in a year. M&A is the likely next step for the struggling camera maker. But GoPro CEO Nick Woodman spoke to Bloomberg's Selena Wang and denied reports that they've hired JP Morgan for a potential sale. Take a listen.
JP Morgan is in fact our banker, but we have not engaged them to help us sell the company. And with that said, if there were an opportunity for GoPro to partner up with a larger organization that could help us scale the company, scale our brand and our reach to consumers, then that's certainly something that we would consider. But it's not something that we're actively engaged in at the moment.
Do you think you will want to actively engage in this? Is there some catalyst you see coming? Have any potential suitors reached out?
Well, I'll answer the question insofar as would we engage in something like this? This is something that we explore from time to time, as it's our job to grow the business in the most strategic way possible, and that definitely is one way to do it. So it's not a new topic at GoPro. But I can't share any more information than that.
Nick, can you talk a little bit about organizations that you would love to work with if theoretically something did work out in terms of a sale or a partnership? I can think of any number of consumer electronics companies that GoPro could fit well into. How are you thinking about it?
Well, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I would say that being a company that is enabling people to capture and share themselves in exciting ways, GoPro is a very social company, and we have one of the strongest brands in the world that is very well regarded for our ability to help people capture and share their active lifestyles. And so we're primarily focused on spreading our brand and spreading our hardware and software solutions to reach as many consumers around the world as possible. So to us, scale is very important.
Now, shifting gears to today's announcement, it seems like GoPro is steadily continuing to narrow its vision. Last year, the entertainment unit shut down. Now the drone business is closing. So how should we understand the product roadmap and revenue diversification of GoPro?
I think what you're seeing from us is that we are listening to our customers more and more, and we're investing in development of products and solutions that our customers want from us. And whereas in the past, I'm even on record as having said in the past that one of the things that makes GoPro strong is that we are our customer, and that in the past we developed products that we really wanted, and that seemed to resonate well with the market. We realize now that we're in the business to build products for our customers, and we need to identify what they want and go and invent for them. That can be difficult because as you're inventing new solutions, be it hardware or software, the consumer doesn't always know what they want, but that's our job to read the data and understand the trends and build for our customers. Our customers loved the entertainment that GoPro enables through the content that we produce today and the content that our customers produce, but they didn't need us to become a full-blown entertainment business. Our customers have told us that they really love buying our cameras from us, and while a passionate number of them wanted to buy drones from us, the majority of our customers want to buy GoPros that connect to a great app experience, and that's what we're investing in moving forward.
Now, Nick, there have been several rounds of layoffs over the past year, and now with this most recent reduction, there will be fewer than 1,000 employees. Should we expect to see further reductions to reach that target level of operating expenses?
No. The recent OPEX reductions, which involved a headcount reduction, get us to the necessary sub $400 million OPEX level that will allow, we believe, GoPro to be profitable in the second half of 2018. And we're seeing really good sell-through of our products. So as long as sales trends continue as forecasted, we feel like we'll be in good shape.
That was GoPro CEO Nick Woodman speaking with Bloomberg's Selena Wang. Coming up, as a longtime Netflix executive, she pushed forward the thinking that employees are adults and deserve freedom. And somehow it worked. We talk with Patti McCord next. And a reminder, all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology weekdays at 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the Best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. During her 14-year tenure at Netflix, Patti McCord helped define the modern workplace. There, she was one of the authors of a now famous 124-page missive called Netflix Culture, Freedom and Responsibility. That's been viewed 15 million times. But as we all know, Silicon Valley hasn't always been the picture-perfect image of maturity. Patti McCord, author of the new book Powerful, Building a Culture of Freedom and Responsibility, just published this week, joined us from New York.
We didn't just assume that we would have a great culture that would stick around and be the same forever. We realized that we could innovate and evolve the culture of the company as long as at the same time as we were innovating and evolving the product itself.
Now, in some cases, having the right rules when it comes to Netflix means having no rules, like unlimited vacation, which is the policy there. Do you think it's more about then hiring the right people or creating the right structure?
It's absolutely both. So if you create a structure that says you need people who have who like a lot of responsibility, they like to have a lot of judgment in their work, they want to make their own decisions, then you have to hire those people that do like to do that. And it's not everybody. And I wrote my book not as a memoir about what we did at Netflix. I wrote my book because I think some of the principles that we apply to everybody at work today, and that we can all think about work differently going forward.
Looking at Silicon Valley specifically, we've seen many examples where this industry has tolerated brilliant jerks, or so they're called. Looking at former Uber CEO Travis Kalanick, when you look at that situation, obviously he helped build a $70 billion company, but what went wrong?
I think people get enamored in their own success. And, you know, a lot of these companies received lots of money, and it was a growth at all costs scenario. And so when you grow fast and you're rewarded for doing that, then you assume that you're doing it right. So these things happen when things are going extraordinarily well. And, you know, we had a bit of a different circumstance at Netflix because at the time that we started coming up, we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of freedom to be able to go outside of the boundaries because we had a lot of work to do. So sometimes I think it happens because you're kind of overcompensated. You have so many people doing so many things that you stop paying attention to good discipline and good efficiency.
Now, part of the problem is that this idea of the young, brash founder or engineer or product guy is a stereotype that people buy into, whether it's investors who fund them or companies that hire them. You know, how problematic is this idea that that is what's ideal?
I think it's problematic across a lot of industries. I consult now to small startups and large corporations, and I talk to people around the world, and I see it over and over again. Some of it's human nature. You know, when you're successful, you think, I want to surround myself with other successful people, and I want them to be smart, and I want them to be articulate, and I want them to be fast on their feet. I want them to be, well, just like me. Right? So like hires like, hires like, hires like. But what's really interesting, I got interviewed earlier in the week, and the woman was asking me about, you know, how interesting it is that so many of these men who are fired from sexual harassment charges are being replaced by women. We were talking about Hoda in specific. And I said, isn't it funny, you know, I hear in the Silicon Valley all the time that the reason we can't have women in management positions is a pipeline issue, right? There's not enough qualified women to take the job. And in each of these cases, the women are already in the room. So, you know, she was sitting right next to him, Matt Lauer, at his desk. So I don't think we really have to look that far to find really qualified, capable women in our workforce.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about another Silicon Valley issue, which is that, you know, a lot of companies here, from Facebook to Google, provide these amazing perks, you know, meals around the clock, transportation services, gym services. You can bring your pet to work. You can get a haircut at work. You know, Netflix, on the other hand, as I understand it, was fairly light on these kind of perks and encourage people to go home when you're done with your work. Do you see anything problematic about this sort of campus mentality?
Well, I got to tell you, it's pretty sweet here at Bloomberg in New York.
We do have some fancy
You do
snacks.
have some fancy stuff here.
I don't get to bring my dog to work, but other than that.
I think anything can go overboard. I worked in the Silicon Valley for over 30 years, and I've seen the pendulum swing more than once. And so, the problem for me with too many perks and taking care of people from everything from their laundry to their transportation, you have to figure out what things make the company efficient and effective and what things sort of treat people like children. And so, I understand the trade-offs people make. I understand the transportation issue. In the Bay Area, transportation is really difficult, and we don't have the infrastructure that you have here in New York, for example, to get people around. But, some of it just seems silly to me, and it might be just because I've seen the rich times and I've seen the poor times, and so I want to link what we do and how we treat people to our successes as businesses and to the delight that we give our customers and our clients. And if you focus on that, then you rethink some of that stuff. And that correlation that people assume that if I make employees extraordinarily happy, they'll be extraordinarily successful, I'm not sure I really buy that.
Patti McCord, author of Powerful: Building a Culture of Freedom and Responsibility. Most companies don't expect police to regularly raid their offices, but Uber isn't most companies. And this week we learned that in order to foil raids, the ride-hailing giant developed a secret tool they call Ripley. That tool allows Uber to lock down equipment in foreign offices to thwart police raids, according to 3 people with knowledge of this system. Uber routinely used Ripley from spring 2015 until late 2016. Coming up, our conversation with Turner CEO John Martin, what he has to say about the potential AT&T Time Warner merger next. And also from CES, we asked Sonys CEO if the entertainment giant plans to sell its TV or movie studios. This is Bloomberg.
For now, the strategy is really, as I said before, to shore up our motion picture business and then make sure that with any of the deals that we may consider in the future, that we're in the driver's seat and not in a situation where we have to give up control of the assets that we've grown over the years.
Huawei's U.S. expansion plans have hit a serious bump in the road. A deal between the Chinese smartphone maker and AT&T fell through due to what many say is political pressure. Huawei had been set to launch its new flagship smartphone, the Huawei Mate 10 Pro, with AT&T in February. AT&T's cancellation comes weeks after the U.S. Senate and House Intelligence Committees reportedly sent letters to the FCC arguing that Huawei was a security threat. And it's pretty bad timing for Huawei. The company showed off the new smartphone at CES earlier this week. And now we head back to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. While there, we caught up with Sony CEO Kazuo Hirai. He told us that Sony wants to be a buyer in media consolidation. So naturally, we asked just who they might be targeting. Take a listen.
The strategy right now is really to make sure that we really have a very strong operation first and foremost before we start looking at options. I mean, as these discussions come up, we will enter into them, but it's with the idea to make sure that the first priority is really to make sure we show up our own studio.
So let's talk about the broader strategy then. Would that involve better IP, better distribution, better tie-ups in Asia, a focus on more niche movies, for example?
I think you hit some great points. I think the first thing that we really need to do is look at the IP library that we have. Spider-Man obviously being one of the greatest IPs. We have a lot of other IPs, Jumanji, for example, which is also something of a revival for us. And make sure that we go back into our library and take advantage of the IP library that we have. I think that there's also a lot of potential for tapping into our video game IP for first-party software that we have through Sony Interactive Entertainment. And those discussions are ongoing as well. And it's also making sure that we have the right kind of financing, financial arrangements as we go into motion picture production to make sure that we have the appropriate producer fees and make sure that we also control production costs, which is another area that we need to focus on a lot more.
Now, So you guys are a stakeholder in Spotify. I'm curious, what do you think of their plans to list directly, and does Sony have any intention of selling shares?
At this point, we have not made any determinations in that regard, and obviously, it's Spotify's decision to go into the public market, and I think that over time it'll give them more ability to really make more investments in growing their business going forward.
The music landscape is shifting dramatically. Curious what your thoughts are on, or your expectations are, for YouTube's paid music service and how that will impact the record industry at large.
I think that with YouTube, Spotify, any of the other online services that we have deals with, both on the recorded music side as well as on the publishing side, is really going to make sure that the music industry, the recorded music industry, continues to grow, and that we give artists more opportunities to really get their music out to the consumers through these services. So I actually think that the music business is a very important inflection point for further growth. And I think that, we were talking about the decline of physical distribution, but now with streaming and all our online services that are coming online, I think it's a great time to be in the music business.
Sony ATV recently made a deal with Facebook. What is the motivation for that deal, and what do you think Facebook's intentions in music are?
I think that with other online players, they are also looking to make music a part of their service that they provide to the customers, and I think it's a very competitive edge that a lot of the providers need to have, because music is such an integral part to everything that we do, and in terms of how we enjoy content.
So looking out through 2018, what do you think is the biggest risk to economic growth this year?
I think that from a Sony perspective, we want to make sure that whether it's multilateral or bilateral discussions that happen between countries and territories, that there is a free flow of content, product, also data as well as people. And every time there's an issue or some hindrance to stop that free flow, that's going to impact our business in a negative way. So I just want to make sure that in these discussions, the free trade of various goods and services is on the forefront of everything that we talk about.
So Sony CEOs traditionally have about a 6-year tenure. You are coming into your 6th year this year. Curious what your own plans are and what your intentions are for this year.
I serve at the pleasure of the board and the shareholders. As you know, we're just completing our second 3-year mid-range planning session, going into our third as of April. So we just want to make sure that we plan and execute accordingly.
That was our interview with Sony CEO Kaz Hirai at CES in Las Vegas. While there, we also caught up with Turner CEO John Martin and asked Martin about AT&T's possible merger with Time Warner and whether he's spoken with AT&T's entertainment folks about what the priorities would be if the deal gets done. Take a listen.
I think the benefits of a Turner and more broadly speaking Time Warner connecting with an AT&T is right now premium content companies like us are racing, we're calling it a race to the center. We're trying to pick up more scale technology, more data, more ability to reach our fans and know who our fans are. And AT&T's data, their scale tech platform, I think is going to enable us to have really significant advertising opportunities it's just going to supercharge the strategy that Turner's been on. In addition, AT&T's DirecTV subscribers and its tens and tens of millions of mobile customer relationships are going to provide us new and innovative ways to get our content and products, maybe such as a Boomerang and Filmstruck, for example, directly to mobile customers, because I believe the next 5 to 10 years, the fastest growth in video consumption is going to be through mobile. So those are going to really be the priorities. Drive advertising, make it addressable, find out who our fans are, and then reach more and more people over more and more devices.
There are major regulatory challenges, however. What role do you think President Trump's disdain for CNN played in the DOJ's review of this deal?
I really have no idea. I can't possibly speculate. It would be inappropriate for me to speculate. Fortunately for me, I'm focused on running Turner, and we've got teams of incredibly capable people who are working really, really diligently and hard to make sure that the deal closes, and we fully expect that it will. And we're planning for that day to happen, and we can't wait to get going.
Fox News and MSNBC have made gains on CNN, largely driven by Sean Hannity and Rachel Maddow. What can CNN do to buck that trend? And do you think this moderate model, if you will, is sustainable?
Well, I think CNN's model is sustainable. If you look across the three networks that you just mentioned, Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN, all their ratings are up. Cable news ratings in 2017 were the highest that they've been in years. And yes, depending on the particular climate and depending on what the particular subject matter is, it might be possible that MSNBC does a little bit better, or it might be possible that Fox News does better. But I will tell you that CNN completed its best year in 2017 ever. Record year. It's been a top 10 ad-supported cable network for 5 quarters in a row, something it hasn't been able to do in 22 years. So the CNN business model has never been stronger. And frankly, I don't think there's ever been a more important time for CNN's place as it relates to journalistic integrity and what it means not only to the country but to the world. I'm incredibly proud of what Jeff Zucker is doing in the leadership there and what our journalists are doing every day. And we have no plans on changing, trying to be the best journalistic organization in the world.
Now, AT&T has talked about slicing up shows, making them more adaptable for a mobile audience. Is that something you'd consider doing?
Absolutely. I think it's something that we would do with or without AT&T. I think the ability to break down traditional long-form formats to shorter shows, making them available on mobile devices, frankly, maybe changing the windowing somewhat of our shows and making them available on alternative devices before they even show up on linear TV. I think all of this will be ways that we, with our big brands and our notable brands and our fans, we have to stay connected and engaged with our fan base, and we're going to be trying and experimenting with a lot of different ways to do that.
That was Turner CEO John Martin. Coming up, the crypto craze of 2017 seems to have died down due to regulation concerns. What to expect from digital currencies in the new year? Next, this is Bloomberg. Dropbox is said to have filed confidentially for an initial public offering in the United States. And according to people familiar, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan will co-lead the listing, which is privately valued at $10 billion. Dropbox offers file sharing and cloud storage services. Well, the SEC is cracking down on a Hong Kong-based company that benefited from 2017's cryptocurrency fever to the tune of a 900% stock surge. The SEC is suspending trading in shares of UBI blockchain internet due to, quote, unexplained market activity. The company, lacking in revenues and even a marketable product, reached a $3 billion market cap before concerns about executives' history were raised in a story by Bloomberg News. We were joined by Jahan Chu, managing partner of Hong Kong-based Kinetic Capital. Chu started investing in Bitcoin in 2013 when the digital asset saw its first major rally and has since started a venture capital firm investing in blockchain technologies. Also joining us from New York, the author of the story, our editor-at-large, Corey Johnson.
This is really indicative of how the entire market is reacting to the phenomenon of Bitcoin and blockchain and cryptocurrency trading. And I think it's really important to note out of this story that the SEC did step in, and I think it's a good thing that they did, to investigate. Now, there's been no necessarily kind of sign of wrongdoing, but they're adding guideposts, they're adding investigation, they're adding some type of structure to the market to try and grow it in a more safe and I think sustainable way. Now, as far as UBI, I think that they're doing what they're doing, and maybe they're related to blockchain, maybe they're not. I have no idea. But I think that what we're seeing in 2018 is really the year of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency trading becoming a social phenomenon, and that's different.
What does that mean?
It means that I was in New York and I was in line at a bagel shop. I was in line at Whole Foods. I was eating noodles, and everybody was talking about trading cryptocurrency.
But does that mean it has inherent value, is the question?
No, trading does not mean it has inherent value, but what it does mean is that it has a massive onslaught of attention. And these attention economies that turn into actual development and add support and add liquidity to these markets can develop into meaningful and lasting type of development for applications. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. Blockchain technology is about software that's being built, and cryptocurrency trading is just what we see on the surface.
And,
now,
Emily,
Corey,
well, I just would add is
go
that,
ahead.
God is in the details, right? So one would think that a Hong Kong listed company might be in Hong Kong, which Jahan just said. And in fact, even that's more interesting. Their lawyer is a guy in Chicago. His business partner is a guy in Las Vegas. When I called their New York headquarters, it rang on someone's cell phone. When I called their main number, it rang just disconnected. So things are much more interesting here than they seem, and I think that that's true probably of all these investments. Indeed, the differences between Bitcoin and Ripple are substantial. It's worth finding out for investors to really understand what lies beneath these things, to try to determine what the intrinsic value is, not just guess if there's a greater fool who will pay a higher price.
Meantime, Jahan, cryptocurrencies running into headwinds, not just in the U.S., but also in China, with this talk about the Chinese government cutting off the power supply to Bitcoin miners. I mean, how serious do you think that is?
I think this is really the kind of final strike of the Chinese government's desire to reset the entire story of blockchain. I think what they want to do is clear the decks, and they've done it with exchanges, they've done it with ICOs, and now they're doing it with mining. I think ultimately they understand the value and the potential and the utility for society, for the economy, for industry to build anew, and I think that's what they're doing. I don't think this is the end of exchanges. I don't think it's the end of ICOs. This is merely the Chinese government resetting and taking control of what they actually believe will be a truly transformational technology.
Meantime, other cryptocurrencies getting dragged down today. Corey, you spoke with the CEO of Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse. Take a listen to what he had to say.
There's no doubt 2017 has been, amongst other things, the year of crypto. And within the year of crypto, XRP has outperformed every other digital asset out there. So year to date, as that chart showed, we're up about 20,000%.
That's from December 27th, Corey, but, Ripple going down with some of the others today. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think the volatility in these, I'm trying to not say something obvious. It's obviously been volatile with these with these currencies or these trades, but I think that what our traditional lens of looking at the volatility in equities, for example, say, wow, it's down a lot since December 27th, or down a lot in the last hour. I took last week off, so I looked at my Bloomberg terminal. Let me show you my Bloomberg terminal. When we look at what happened to Ripple trading over the last day, yeah, sure enough, it's down 11%. But if I change this chart, let's say the last 14 days, so there's an intraday chart for 14 days, which on the Bloomberg terminal is a GIP 18. Well, look, it's up. It's up a lot. It's up, 100%, 38% in the last 14 days. So I think that one of the interesting things is the volatility that we've seen tends to take the headlines. But the long-term rise that we've seen over the course of long-term, if long-term's a year, really tells more of the story. And I think more to the point, again, when you look into the details and you see the great differences between Ripple and Bitcoin, between the XRP and the like-minded blockchain technology, but the very different ways that they work, the different ways that they trade, and the different problems they're trying to solve, you find a much more interesting story. And again, that long-term lens, even if 1 year is long-term, is not the lens that we're used to applying when it comes to moves in equities, but maybe the appropriate one to apply, even though interestingly, the futures contracts have not reduced the volatility in the trade in Bitcoin.
That was Jahan Chu, Kinetic Capital Managing Partner, and our Bloomberg Editor-at-Large, Corey Johnson. And that does it for this edition of the Best of Bloomberg Technology. Tune in this Wednesday when Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter head back to Washington to testify on terrorism and social media. We'll bring you all the headlines. Tune in every day, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. And remember, all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology Weekdays. That is all for now. This is Bloomberg.